Let's talk about the Belgian Grand Prix. The race start was delayed and then abandoned after 2 formation laps. The cars were stopped for 3 hours, the red flag was then removed, and there was 2 laps under the safety car with the red flag being displayed again on their 3rd lap. The race would not be restarted and was declared an official race, with Max Verstappen the winner after qualifying on pole and half points awarded. So the cars ran 2 laps behind the safety car, and then at the beginning of the 3rd lap the red flag was displayed. But it's interesting though, because the regulations require that 2 laps to be completed for an official Grand Prix. But with the red flag, the race gets a count back to the penultimate lap before the red flag. So this would be the running order at the completion of lap 1, not lap 2. Additionally, with the lap 1 being an out lap from the pits, does that actually count as a lap? So does this meet the 2 lap requirement? Now, I'm not a regulations expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I'd argue that it doesn't. But I have bigger issues with this event than just that. 2 laps under the safety car is not a race. The race in the truest sense of racing didn't actually start. Technically within the regulations, it did. Because when the red flag was withdrawn, it was considered a safety car period and not formation laps, even though prior to the red flag, the start procedure had been abandoned and there was no official start. I know, it's confusing. But you can't call an attempt at a race if there's no actual racing. But why is it that 2 laps are even considered to make the event official? 2 laps is so little of the actual race, even at Spa. So why is it that that number is chosen? Spa being the largest track, it has the fewest laps. So 2 laps at Spa equates to 4.5% of the race. So not even 5% of the race has to be completed to have an official event and award points. It seems a bit ridiculous to me. Monaco is 78 laps. If only 2 laps need to be completed, that's only 2.6% of the race. Did the FIA make the right decision to not go ahead with the race? Well, that's a tough question. The thing is, the conditions were bad, and were actually worse when they got back out behind the safety car. I don't think there was any reason for them to try and race at that point. I just wonder why so little laps were done with the safety car at the start. They only did 2 laps. They could have maybe done a little bit more to see if conditions improved, most notably the standing water, and then with that is visibility. But other than that, I can't really come up with a better solution. So I'd have to say not racing looks like the best decision. You know, the problem with Spa is it's such a big track, it takes so long on our safety car to get back around the track that it's really hard for a dry line to start to form. But here's the thing, could the FIA and Formula One be doing more to ensure fans get the show they pay for? Or at least some sort of compensation when this kind of thing happens? So there was talks about running on Monday, which would seem like a good idea. Zandvoort is only something like 3 hours away, so it's not like they have to fly across the globe to another continent. But the logistics of having enough track marshals is one thing. Marshals are volunteers who give up their time to come in for a weekend to work a race. They don't work for the track, they have lives and jobs outside of the track. They may not have been available. Maybe the marshalling system needs to be reevaluated. American motorsports like IndyCar and NASCAR don't rely on volunteer marshals to put on races, so maybe there's better solutions. Also, Monday was supposed to rain too, so that may not have worked. Maybe the rain would have been light enough that there wouldn't have been as much standing water. It's hard to say though. Did the FIA intentionally run the minimum laps though just to ensure there was an official event for commercial reasons? I would really hope this wouldn't be the case, but it's hard to understand why they would go back out with the rain still continuing to fall like it was at the start of the race when they stopped the car so early during the start sequence. As a fan, I feel disappointed. I feel like I can now truly sympathize with F1 fans during the 2005 United States Grand Prix now. This isn't even a race to me. I don't even feel that the race actually started because there was no racing. I sat around for 3 to 4 hours waiting to see racing action, even if it was a little, and was denied it. But I can get over that. I can't even begin though to imagine how the fans feel that were at the track that actually spent money to watch a race and didn't get to see anything. The fans that sat out all day in the rain to watch a race and now get nothing. It's hard though to blame F1 or the FIA. They can't control the weather, but it just feels like there should be something done to ensure this doesn't happen again. If there's a race, there should actually be a race, not just 2 laps behind a safety car. That's not what fans pay to see. So, in my NASCAR videos, on multiple times, I've mentioned that things that F1 does where they have an advantage over NASCAR with. Well, it's time to now reverse these roles. I would never have to make this video for NASCAR because NASCAR would not be in this position. NASCAR 1 doesn't have an official race until 50% or the completion of stage 2, whichever comes first. If they can't get to 50%, they will postpone the race to the next day, even if it's already started. Or even 2 days if they have to. In 2007 at Michigan, they had to postpone the race until Tuesday, and there was concerns early on Tuesday of not being able to get the race in either due to fog. One of the ideas being tossed around was to pack up, go to the next race, and move Michigan to a later date in the schedule. Ultimately, the race was completed Tuesday, but NASCAR pushed the race all the way back to Tuesday despite having to travel over 600 miles from Brooklyn, Michigan to the shops in Charlotte, North Carolina, before then backtracking north 150 miles back to Bristol, Tennessee. In this case, most F1 teams probably wouldn't need to travel back to the shops, but let's say they do. It's hard to find a universal travel number here because teams are scattered throughout different cities and even different countries. But a comparison of a trip from Spa to Silverstone and back to Zandvoort would be just over 700 miles. So it doesn't really seem like it's really much of a travel issue in this example, especially since I don't think teams would travel back to their shops. But this could definitely be an issue if we're talking about a race in, say, Asia or the Americas. Maybe F1 needs to build a schedule around the possibility of having a race delayed a day in the future. With a race to be announced, it makes me consider the possibility for a return to Spa, but that seems unlikely. The only real slot I can find that isn't completely ridiculous would be between Sochi and Turkey on October 1st through the 3rd. But that still seems unlikely due to the amount of travel between Sochi and Istanbul for the teams. They probably are going to want that week off in between. Also, the schedule has been reduced from 23 to 22 races, so it's not like an extra race would be that big of an issue because, one, the Spa race never actually happened, so running it again just kind of cancels itself out, but also there were plans to do 23 races, so teams were prepared for that amount, so adding an extra race is really not an issue. It's really just an issue of finding space in the schedule to have another race back at Spa. Let's get into some quotes though now. First, some thoughts from some drivers. Sebastian Vettel had this to say on the first attempt to start the race after the delayed start. Quote, "What's the difference now? Nothing. I guess TV money is the difference? I'm just stating the obvious. There's more rain the last 20 minutes now than before." End quote. Vettel was also asked if his 5 points was a fair reward for his qualifying performance. He said, quote, "But that's a joke. If you want to get a reward for qualifying, you should get points for qualifying. What did we do today? I don't know. I thought you had to do 25% of the race to get points." End quote. Daniel Ricciardo's thoughts on the fans being refunded their money, quote, "I'd love for them to get refunded or compensated." End quote. Lewis Hamilton, quote, "Today was a farce, and the only people lose out are the fans who paid good money to watch us race. Of course you can't do anything about the weather, but we have sophisticated equipment to tell us what's going on, and it was clear the weather wasn't going to let up." End quote. In reference to being sent back out under the safety car, Hamilton said, quote, "We were sent out for one reason and one reason only. 2 laps behind a safety car where there's no possibility to gain or lose a place or provide entertainment to fans isn't racing." End quote. McLaren's CEO Zach Brown said, quote, "The regulations state that after we do a few laps it can be called a race. I think that needs to be reviewed. I don't think anyone would argue the weather was safe to race in, but we need a better solution as a sport when that kind of situation happens. The outcome should not be a race after 3 laps behind a safety car. This is what the rules say, but that now needs to be reviewed by all of us to learn from today and realize if we are given this type of situation, what would we do differently to make sure the outcome is everyone gets their race in? Whether that's the following day, whether we come back, it's quite complicated with the schedule, but I don't think anyone would say today it felt right calling that a race." End quote. FIA race director Michael Massey said, quote, "We gave every available opportunity with the rulebook, with the provisions of the International Sporting Code, to give us the best opportunity to be able to complete a race. And so, unfortunately, on this occasion, we could not go the full distance that was available, but with the provisions in the ISC to stop the clock was what we tried to do, to see if we could get ourselves in the weather window of some activity." End quote. In reference to demands by fans for refunds, Formula One CEO Stefano Domenicali was asked if he supported the idea, and he said, quote, "No, I don't." He further said, quote, "Unfortunately, the race is not there. You can pay the ticket, and that is what it is. At the end of the day, for sure, the organizer, together with us, will consider the maximum attention to the fans, that's for sure." End quote. In 2005, there were refunds offered for the United States Grand Prix through the IMS ticket office, but these were not done by F1 or even Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The refunds were done by Michelin, who stepped up, admitted their mistake, and took responsibility for it by voluntarily offering refunds. The problem is this was an event that was 1, technically completed as an official race, and 2, was not a normal race due to weather, something outside of anyone's control. So that's why I find it highly unlikely that any refunds will be done. It's unfortunate, and it sucks for the fans that spent their hard-earned money to go to a race to have a good time, but this is the problem. More needs to be done. As someone who has a degree in sports marketing and has worked in sports, this is the worst possible outcome for an event. Every game I've ever worked, it was always about ensuring the best fan experience possible. Obviously, in this case, fan experience can't outweigh the cost of driver, marshal, or even fan safety. But there needs to be more done to ensure that this kind of situation doesn't occur again. Formula One fans deserve better than this. It just feels in some ways the fan experience is not being looked at as important. if they're just going to intentionally go out and run 2 laps behind the safety car just so they can call it an official race and just move on. My first ever boss in sports had a saying, quote, "It's always somebody's first game." I guarantee that somebody was at their first F1 race at Spa, and now their attitude towards Formula 1 may now be negatively affected by the poor experience and the loss of money for attending a race without any racing. The problem is, I'm not sure what the solution here is, but what happened in Belgium isn't it. Fans pay to see racing, not 2 laps behind the safety car. So the FIA can say, "Yep, we got an official race now, let's move on." That's not racing and shouldn't be considered racing. The bottom line is, I stand behind the FIA's decision not to race in the conditions. Maybe everything the FIA did to get the race in was all they could do within the rules, but that just means the rules need to change. Maybe the way F1 creates schedules needs to change. Something needs to change. The biggest problem is, this isn't the first time the FIA has felt like it lacked the care for the fan experience. Like I mentioned, the 2005 United States Grand Prix, the FIA just stood around and failed to help a solution be found to a problem that couldn't have fixed itself. The tires weren't just going to magically be able to survive the race. Something had to be done, and nothing was, and we got the fewest ever cars to start a Grand Prix. And now we have the shortest ever Grand Prix. The 2021 Belgian Grand Prix will go down as the shortest ever race in Formula 1 history at just 6.880 kilometers, less than an entire lap around Spa, despite there not actually being any real racing having taken place. So now, you've heard from me, and now I want to hear from you. What were your thoughts on the Belgian Grand Prix? What should F1 and the FIA do going forward for situations like this? Let me know what do you think down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and until next time, so long everybody.